Scarborough is still this special place. I think that anywhere that makes you feel like you're allowed to exist in any particular way, right? Like, I shouldn't have been that happy considering the circumstances of my life at that time. I shouldn't have been that excited, and I shouldn't have had carried so many positive memories, and yet I did.
Hi, I'm Stacey Lee Kong, and you're watching Making Our Own Way, a Friday Things video series about GTA creatives who are finding their own paths to success. Today, I'm chatting with author Téa Mutonji. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to chat.
Thank you for having me.
It's like we haven't had a whole 7 conversations before now. It's fine.
I've been here for 7 hours.
It's true. We've been just hanging out. But now we're going to ask questions. So I'm going to start with a very easy first one. Tell me about the first story or poem or thing that you wrote.
I don't remember the first poem because I've been writing kind of my whole life. I thought I was going to be a memoirist. I thought for sure I was going to write essays and poems my whole life. I had no interest in fiction. I didn't really read that much fiction to begin with. I read a lot of memoirs and a lot of poetry, and because of the program, I had to take a fiction class as part of my requirements. It was I had no choice. And my first real, I'm going to write a short story, Téa voice, Téa S, whatever.
Yeah.
It was Property of Neil, which is it's just funny that first story is becoming relevant today.
No, I love that though. I love that because it also feels like the themes that we've been exploring, there's something a little bit timeless about human, it's human nature, and we're still thinking about these things, and even as all of the details change, it doesn't mean that the story and the themes and the emotions those are constant. I find that comforting, although maybe that says more about me than anything else.
No, I'm very consistent. I think I've been writing about the same thing, and I probably will always
be interested in those things.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, I have more questions, but first I read that when you first went to university, your plan was not to be a writer, not even a memoirist. It was to study politics or law. So I want to know why you didn't see writing as a potential career at that time and what changed for you.
Yeah, well, I actually started as an art management major when I first got in at University of Toronto Scarborough. And I was an actor, and I was failing at being an actor because I drank too much. And that's just, you kind of have to be presentable when you go to auditions, whatever.
Who knew?
Who knew? And I was still writing. Writing has been part of my life forever. It was always a hobby. It was just the thing I did. And because writing was just the thing I did, it wasn't a career. It's sort of I paint my nails frequently.
Yeah.
It's just a thing I do. So I never thought of it as a career because I was very focused on I'm going to get into this whole art management world. Part of the art management program, there's a lot of math related courses, and I just kept failing those. I just suck at math. So I switched to political science. Yeah. And then I got really into women and gender studies. I really love that. I love IDS quite a bit. So I just really got into politics. So I was okay, it's fine. I'll just go to law school. And I just never really thought about writing because it was just the thing I did constantly. So it was not something I was trying to be, right? A lot of people are trying to become a writer, but I was always a writer. So that I never had that moment. But I will say I'm a bit of a realist. So I just also wouldn't desire for myself a career that is lucrative. I don't know how else to say it.
That is what we are doing at this moment.
Yeah, I was just not the kind of person that's I'm going to dedicate my life to doing this thing where I'm going to not profit and I'm going to maybe struggle. It's just it's not something that I was interested in at all. So when I was submitting...
Little did you know.
Well, when I was submitting stories and stuff like that, I was oh, cute. If I win this contest, it's $50. Cute. Groceries for a week, I'm down. But it was still just an extra $50. It wasn't a career.
This is how I'm going to pay my rent?
Yeah, I was $50 is cute. I get to go out, have a nice steak meal or something.
We are also talking about a different time. This was a different economic time. It's not 2023 that we're talking about. You could get a steak meal for $50.
Yes. That's essentially writing yeah, I never really had a desire to be a writer in the way that's like a professional, like academic,
Right.
just because it was just who I was, you know? The fact that I was sharing it was just because I wanted to. It wasn't because I was trying to become some big novelist, because to me, I kind of already was enough of a writer to satisfy my needs.
Right.
But, you know, the book happened, and I guess now I'm a writer.
Surprise!
Whoops.
So it wasn't like a conscious, when you were writing the book, this wasn't a conscious, like, I'm going to be an author as my job.
Well, the thing about the book is that the contest happened first, right? Because I did submit to Vivek Shreya's contest,
Right.
Yes Books. And that for me was more of like a personal challenge, because I had, through the creative writing program, I had worked on this collection of poems with Daniel Tisdale, who was my professor and my mentor at the time. And we had a finished book.
Right.
So when the contest came out, he just emailed me being like, you should submit because you have a book to submit. And I was like, why would I do the easy thing and just submit the book that's already ready when I could just have some fun?
Immigrant Daughter Overachiever, please. Would love to hear more.
And I was like, well, you know, I started writing fiction this semester and it was kind of fun. I'm just gonna write something new. So I submitted to Vivek a collection of my work. So there were some poems, some fiction, short stories, and then maybe one or two essays. But because I have a very dedication to specific themes, they could just all be related as
Right.
like one voice. You know, if I'm writing in my fiction voice or my nonfiction voice, they're kind of a little bit similar, or at least at the time. You know, I was still pretty new, so my voice was a bit more consistent throughout my genres.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to feel like I've accomplished something. So it really was a personal vendetta. I didn't have like, oh, if I win this contest, I'm going to be a published author. For me, it was like, if I dedicate 4 months to writing something, then I've done something.
Right.
And I could just go to bed knowing that I've completed something, because at the time I was messy. So
Yes.
I had issues. So I just wanted to feel fulfilled and dedicated.
And to finish something.
Yeah.
Like achieve this goal.
Like writing was just like, you know, it was my happy place. And I guess I was a little bit unhappy at the time. So I was like, let me just spend some time. Yeah, I was almost not going to submit because I was just like, okay, I done the thing. I wrote a book. I binded things together. It feels complete. It feels full. That's all I needed to do.
Right.
The contest was just sort of like a suggestion. And my friend was like, that's the stupidest shit I've ever heard in my life.
A little bit. I'm so glad someone said that.
And she called me and I'm like, oh, I'm on my way to work. She goes, what, did you submit? And I'm like, well, no, like, I'm not going to win. She's like, that's so dumb. You've got to submit. So I was like, okay, fine, I guess so. So I just kind of submitted on my way to work. I was bartending, or I was serving at Jack Astor's at the time.
Like from your phone?
No, from like I was home still. Like,
Oh, okay,
I was
okay.
putting on makeup. I'm like getting
she's
ready.
on the TTC.
I'm like
She's-
closing cocktail that night.
She's deleting
good.
stuff from my iPhone.
And she's like, no, you've got to do this, Téa. You spent so much time working on it. Like it consumed you. Like, why does the end have to be you finished it? Why can't the end be you tried? And I was like, fine, okay, whatever. Oops. And then Vivek emailed me and I was
life
like, that
lesson.
is messed up.
Okay, why? So I wanted to ask you why VS Books was the right home, but it also sounds like you didn't totally know it was the right home.
Yeah, I mean, Shut Up You're Pretty wouldn't have been possible without Vivek. Like, it wasn't a real book until Vivek got involved, right? It was a character. What I had was a person, a story of someone, but the actual book, I mean, that is 100% Vivek getting involved and, you know, caring about my writing. Vivek was also like the first person I related to that I was working with in terms of my writing. I mean, I love my professors. I worked with Andrew Westall, and Daniel Tisdale.
Sometimes people have like pseudonyms, that's fine.
You know, and you know, they're white, male, Canadian people, and you know, they're great. I had a really positive experience with them. But then I get to work with Vivek, who just gets me, who's seen me, and as I'm talking about the story I want to tell, she just gets my story, and I felt so like vibrant. All of a sudden, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this for real. Like, had it been anybody else, I probably wouldn't have been as committed or as interested. But Vivek kind of just blew my mind.
Yeah.
She's just kind of amazing.
She's very cool.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
so
just
cool.
like Shut Up You're Pretty doesn't exist without Vivek. It's just like, you know, the chicken kind of egg theory. Vivek came first, right? Like, that's the book for me. Like, that's my experience.
I love that too, because I feel like sometimes when we think about, and also I'm biased because I'm an editor, but I think sometimes when we think about editorial processes or writing, we think of writers as these isolated beings tapping with their keyboards, and we don't necessarily see the influence of someone like Vivek who, like, she just shaped this thing and like helped you tell the story that you already had in you. But, and I like the idea of reminding people that a lot of these creative fields are collaborative. Like, we don't actually create things by ourselves in isolation from the world. Like, we need the world around us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really nice. Like, an editor that makes you think is just a good editor.
Yeah. Tell me about the themes you keep returning to, because I also think I notice that I do that myself as a writer and as a storyteller and as an editor. There are some things that just I am not done exploring yet and may not ever be done exploring. And I want to hear what those things are for you. I'm
very committed to relationships between specific kind of people. So I'm like obsessed with writing about like friendship, like the very quiet, the very private friendship between women, little girls, what have you. And then I feel that same way about like mother and daughter relationships. Like I think I like to put two characters sort of like in a box and then shake the box a little bit and then see what happens.
Could be anything.
But in a more direct sense, like I think I always say I write about the messy Black girl who's just like stupid and hopeless and desperate, you know, and romantic. Yeah, that's like my jam.
I love that. But also, like, why? Tell me why that's so interesting to you.
Because I'm stupid and messy and romantic.
Yes.
But also because, I grew up reading a lot. And something about reading a lot, from my experience, I felt a little bit lonely because of the stories I was reading.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up, yes, I spent my childhood in Scarborough, but from grade 9 to 12, I guess throughout all high school, I was in Oshawa, Ontario. So I was in Durham. And at the time, it was very, very predominantly white. And then I'm reading mostly books by white people, by white girls. And I was jealous that these, like, white girls got to, like, have a life. Like, they got to, like, go to parties on the weekend. And they stole their parents' car. And, like, ooh, they kissed the wrong person. I was jealous that they got to experience everything, right? Whereas, like, when I think of my own life growing up, like, I mostly stayed home up until my rebel stage.
I was going to say, eventually you had to become messy.
But for the first half, I was very much like church on Sundays, you know, helping around in the kitchen, braiding my sisters, goody good shoe, whatever, caring about my grades so that I could, you know, be a certain kind of person in my future life. I felt really jealous of my friends at school, and I felt jealous of the characters I was reading. And I think I started to want to mimic that. Like, I mean, I'm a teenager, I'm young. It's easy to think that that's what life's about, right? Like,
but also it's just so different. Like, it's very different. And I think I was wondering if this was part of it, the way that we are often not just told how we should be, but the way that we are shown. Like, the people who are like us in literature or movies or whatever often aren't allowed to make mistakes. They often aren't allowed to be messy.
No.
They definitely should not be kissing the wrong person.
No.
Like, they shouldn't be doing any of those things. And so what you're talking about, the like loneliness of not just not seeing yourself in like these white characters, but also like the possibility of what your life could be it feels like deeper than just like, oh, there are no characters of color in this book. Like, it's also life experience. Yeah,
it had, to me, really had to do, because in the end, I still found myself relating sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? Because, I'm admitting this now that I'm older. I'm definitely a massive romantic. So, of course, there's a part of me that yearned this kind of desire that I read in stories, but I didn't feel I was allowed to execute. And it's through my writing that I started to want to have certain experiences, which I think people assume that it's the other way around. Like, my experience informed my writing. But for me, it's actually been, I wrote about this cool ass shit and I'm going to try it. I have a problem. So I think that really was what I was really investing with characters for me. And it's, I just felt really lonely. I keep saying that I write primarily for myself. I write for young Téa. I write for Durham Téa. I write for Téa, who has spent way too much time being a bartender. I write for that person more than I write for the public. So I don't know, maybe I'm a selfish writer, but it pleases me, so who cares?
First of all, that's not a bad thing. But reading Shut Up, You're Pretty, like, there were so many experiences that your characters had that I have never had. And at this point in my life, also, like, I'm too tired to try to have. I'm not trying that. But there was still like the nugget that I was like, oh, but I have felt lonely like that. I have felt sad like that. Or I have felt like that feeling of connection with another person, with another woman. And I'm like, oh, this friendship makes me so happy. I have felt that. So it's not necessarily, like, I think it's not selfish. It's just like honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so much of a story to me is in the details, right? Like, narrative is formulaic. There's a beginning, there's an end, there's a middle, there's a structure, regardless. Even if you're like a very experimental writer that's pushing boundaries and pushing the lines, the line is still there. So what makes the story juicy, like what makes it kind of like pop, is just the little details, right? Like, you know, you're putting on makeup on, there's a difference between red lipstick versus pink lipstick. And I always think about that when I'm writing. Like, my first draft of a story is always very like, not much in terms of detail. I have to return to it and add a color to the sofa, or like, you know, add a way that they spoke or whatever. Like, all the details for me comes my second attempt.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So I felt like all of those details really grounded the story in place. Like when you were talking about a street that I recognized or like a park or whatever, but I kept noticing, like you described, the scent of something or a meal or like dynamics between people. And I wanted to talk a bit about that granular description because this is extremely nerdy, but like, I don't know if you've ever read like The Hobbit or any of those types of books, but there's a lot of description of like completely extraneous bullshit. Like, we don't need to know the exact texture of the honey, but I love that. Yeah. That helps me feel like I'm in the story. And so I felt the same way. When you were describing the scent of a food, like, I'm from Trinidad. It's not that I have the same scent memory, but it was like the feeling of being there. So it's so fascinating to me that you just like layer that on later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because it does come naturally to me because it's sort of like how I go through life.
Yes.
But when I'm working on the story, the first draft, I'm very much like a feeling first kind of writer. So I tend to, in fact, to a fault, drown in like the interior world of a character.
All of the feelings, all of the time.
I'm doing my MFA right now, and one of the feedback this one wrote was like, well, you can't keep your reader this deep inside the character. I'm like, yes, I can.
Do you know who you're talking to, though?
Yes, I can. But I feel like in order to sort of bounce off of that, I do go back and I'm like, okay, where can I bring exterior things? The more involved I become as a writer, like the more, it's one thing to do writing personally, but then to do it professionally, my world is sort of consumed now with literature. And I find that I spend a lot of quiet times where all I'm actually doing is paying attention to like, oh, is there like a thin sound in the distance? Or like, what time of the day is it? How is the lighting coming through my apartment? And those little details, they excite me. It's like, it's the part of writing that makes me feel like I'm creating, right? It makes me feel like I'm painting something. Oh, I love it.
I think sometimes when we're trying to create things that are digestible for other people, it like waters it down. The things that I find people relate to the best are the things that I'm genuinely excited about. So like that's the thing that comes through, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. That's fun.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you was about place and about Scarborough, because Scarborough is such a big part of Shut Up, You're Pretty, and like I think almost your brand as a writer. Why was Scarborough important to Loli's story? Like, why did it have to be there?
Honestly, like I think that for the most part, I was writing about a character who is trying to figure out who she is based off of who everybody else thinks she is. And that's stressor. Like, it's confusing. And it's like, am I trying to prove myself? Am I trying to defend myself? Like, what's really happening? And I feel like Scarborough just has that reputation to begin with. So I lived in Scarborough my childhood. And, my parents laugh at me for saying this, but it literally was the best part of my life. I don't know what you want me to say. Galloway was a goddamn, when you're a kid and you're romantic and you're impressionable, like it was just exciting. It's still the best of my life. Like, take this in, right? I'm living in government housing. For the most part, a lot of us kids were outside, right? We're like on our bikes, we're drawing on the pavement, whatever it is. We're spending a lot of time together, like always. I would get so excited to go home so I can like go play with my next door neighbor. There's this like community feel. And that's all I remember. So all the bad stuff or whatever the hell, that just wasn't my experience. Or maybe I'm just the kind of like,
you romanticize it a little bit, yeah.
No, but regardless what it is, I just remember when I moved back to Scarborough for undergrad, and every time I would say very proudly, oh, I'm from Galloway. It was the best of my life. People were like, delusional. Something's wrong.
Right.
And that was really interesting to me, that I could have such a powerful and such a decidedly positive feeling towards a place that was just completely opposite for basically everybody around me. So I became obsessed with investigating that feeling, that contradiction. I've realized this about myself now. I definitely have a way of romanticizing things, right? But
I got that.
still, when I think that that's still valid. I think that Scarborough is still this special place. I think that anywhere that makes you feel like you're allowed to exist in any particular way, right? Like, I shouldn't have been that happy considering the circumstances of my life at that time. I shouldn't have been that excited, and I shouldn't have had carried so many positive memories, and yet I did. And it's not that I'm delusional or like, something is wrong with me mentally. It's just that, like, the place that gives you warmth is what you're gonna keep.
Yes.
And I think that I personally haven't experienced that since Scarborough. What's to say, like, every other Scarborough authors have their own little version of that, right? And I think that's my attachment to Scarborough. It's just my happy place. It's just a great place.
But even, like, I think what's funny is, like, yes, clearly you romanticize things. You can tell that you romanticize things if you've read any of your work. And, like, maybe to some extent we all romanticize our childhoods. But I don't know. It's very interesting to me that I feel like so many of the creatives who are making big waves in Toronto right now are from Scarborough. Mm-hmm. And, like, in all different areas of the creative world.
Yeah.
And yet that point that you're making, that's not the reputation. And that, in fact, people are surprised when you say that you loved and enjoyed and had this amazing time of your life there. It's almost like there's something a bit colonial about that understanding.
I don't know how it is now, but at least back in the days, in the early 2000s, a lot of new immigrants were living in Scarborough. So for me, that was also the only place that felt familiar, that felt homey. Yeah. And it allows you to just be a real person, right? Not like a suggestion, not a statistic, not an immigrant, not a specific title, just like a fully realized human being. And I think a lot of us who grew up in Scarborough, who are making art from Scarborough, we're holding on to this, oh, I'm a whole person in this place, in this neighborhood. And then that carries through our work. That's probably also why I'm still attached to it today, because at the end of the day, that's still the place where I became.
Yeah.
Right?
You really are a writer, eh?
Oh my God. I feel like I'm talking shit.
No, it's going so well. I'm like, yes, I wish I could take notes. You've talked about the emotional labor of being a writer of color. Mm-hmm. I want to hear more about how being a Black immigrant woman influences the way that you move through the literary world, and especially the literary world in Canada.
Yeah, it's just a complicated question because there's like, the way I move through the literary world from my home versus how I move in public. Mm-hmm. From my home, it's kind of funny because I've been saying this quite a bit since living in New York. This concept of being Black is really an American thing. It's like a Western thing because, well, I mean, in Congo, we're all Black. You're not thinking about that. People. And then I think by virtue of the way my mother has always been, like, I grew up in a very Congolese household anyways, right? My mother was very much like, we're not in Canada. This is mini Congo. This is Kinshasa. What are you talking about? I really grew up with this mindset. So this concept again of like having to remind myself that I am Black in a certain way, or I'm in public, I am Black, versus at home, I'm just Téa. I feel like I kind of struggle with that in my writing, as in the writing world as well, because I kind of tend to forget that there's this, sense of like being a Black writer versus just being a writer. All I know for sure is that the publishing industry is difficult and it's just not that comfortable. That's just it. Like, I used to have, I don't even know how to talk about it. It's just not that great of a place when you are thinking of these little titles, when you're thinking of who are you to other people. I just don't know if it should be that way, right? So I haven't fully decided how I'm navigating these places. All I know is I'm going to keep writing stories that sing to me, and I'm going to keep sharing them. And if you want to read it, great. If you don't, also great. Do you? I'm going to do me. let's keep it pushing kind of thing, right? Like I'm very much like,
But that's the point of like, you're writing for yourself first.
Yeah.
You're writing stories that you need to see in the world.
yeah.
Which I think has become a bit of a cliche, but actually is deeply meaningful.
Yeah, and sometimes the story I need to see in the world doesn't have like story about a black girl in it. It's just a story about a girl. Yes, she's black. Shocker. Like, get over it.
Yeah.
I just imagine a publishing world where you can just, you know, be whoever you want and then like let that be enough.
Is that not kind of what we are all striving for? What is next for you?
Yeah, I'm focusing on my MFA right now. I'm working on a novel.
Can you tell me anything about the next novel? Because it's not set in Scarborough, right? It's set in Durham, is what I read.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting because it's quite difficult for me to write another place. It's really weird. I'm very embedded in writing about Scarborough. I just know Scarborough so well. I know all the streets. Right. I know all the smells. I know all the places. And I like to write, again, coming back to this idea of detail, those things are so essential to my writing. Whereas, like, I don't know Toronto the way that I know Scarborough. I don't know New York. I don't know any place the way that I know Scarborough. So it's a challenge for me to like, I don't know, I have to think about these things. So I did have to introduce Durham because the only place I know almost as well as I know Scarborough is Durham. So my book is actually set just like in the GTA entirely.
Okay.
But the characters are from Durham, so there's quite a bit of remembrance in that way. Yeah, it's an interesting story.
I think, okay, but I wonder if some of that too is how you, not just that you know Scarborough, but how you know Scarborough. Like, it's a different thing to know a place because you wandered, like, in this pack of children, like, sort of escaping beneath your parents' notice, going to these parks and walking around and, like, being up close and personal versus knowing a place because you've driven through it or you've taken the TTC through. Like, that's not the same level of knowing. So you just have a different level of detail.
Yeah, and that it's been very challenging to realize how different that's on paper.
Yeah.
And so I ended up succumbing to that and picking Durham. And for a moment, I was like, am I like not talented? I was like, why can't I make this work? And I realized I'm just a very observant person, and I like something that feels real. I just don't have a lot of desires to write about a place that isn't true, or that, well, I guess that's debatable. Wakanda's true for a lot of people kind of thing. I just like feeling like I can quite literally put my hand on something and, you know, like do this to it. So
with that exact hand.
That
motion.
exact, this one because my nails are not checked on this
those ones
one.
are fine.
The other one that I'm hiding?
Like not awkwardly
so
at all.
much, yeah.
Okay, is there... It actually wasn't. That was just me joking and kind of being a shit disturber. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you think that we should talk about or that you think I should know?
Earlier we were talking about, like the fact that I write better when I'm at my parents' house. Well, not better, just because I like going home so that I don't have to cook or clean.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and that's like a really cool thing that everybody should know. Writers need people to cook for them.
Okay, so there's this actual like famous feminist text. Have you ever heard of it? It's like, I Need a Wife. It's something like that. Okay, so it was an essay, and it was basically describing the role of a wife to creative men.
Okay.
And it's this woman saying, I need a wife. I need someone to handle the details of my life and to make sure that I eat and to do my laundry. And it was like, I read it in high school, and it was very eye-opening because I was like, oh, first of all, that's the role of wife means a thing in like the political sphere. And also, second of all, where do I get one of those?
Yeah.
I don't want
so crazy.
to do laundry ever.
I love that you said that. I literally was just working on a scene that kind of twinkles with that. That's so funny.
Right.
I'm so excited.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, the Journey Prize, the anthology is currently out.
Yes.
It's, I think we're 12 Black writers emerging. It's really exciting. I just recently saw it at the bookstore, but it's also at the M&S website, and everybody should buy it and read it.
100%.
2 of my stories are in there,
yes.
And a lot of other really amazing people.
They're in there as well.
Yeah.
Mostly we're here for Téa, but
No, I'm kidding.
thank you so much. This was such a good conversation. I so appreciate you being here.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Oh, it's because that camera. We're not getting any information from the monitor. It definitely is rolling.
It's
If you
rolling?
cut it, yeah, because we have light, we have a light, we got a light. If you cut it, it's
That's the light that's recording on?
No, this one. See the red?
There's also one at the front.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was covering. That's my bad. I'm sorry. I'm so bad at this.
It's okay.
You are pretty bad at this, but also.
You can change that. You can change that.
But like, how funny would it be if like later on
do
you're like,
there,
oh,
see?
Yes, can you come back?
It wasn't rolling.
Okay.
It would be so funny. It would be so funny that I throw up.
I would have a whole panic attack. It would be that funny.
Yeah. I just have this.
Oh, okay. Put this way.
We're very serious.
Alright, my bad. Everyone goes. Okay, I'm gonna have to cut some line.
Before we
But
go,
it's an easy cut. Like, I don't think it's gonna be a hard cut to be like, all of this rambling and us losing our shit on the couch. Like, that's not the interview. This actually is B-roll.
It's behind the scenes.
Fair.